we're going to be moving on to something different here. We're going to try a discussion about something that's not necessarily news oriented. Kind of give some background on this. Of course, Thomas and I do Challenge Accepted, really good podcast. You guys should check out. We got some big goals over there.
Oh yeah.
And for the most part, we record maybe half an hour to an hour and talk for like 2 hours afterwards about stuff.
Yeah, or an hour before.
Or an hour before, yeah. So let's talk about some of the things we were talking about. First of all, or the main thing we're going to be talking about this time is how great Guardians it was. Can you go ahead and explain what we're discussing today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, right, we were kind of catching up to talk about whatever the episode that we were recording, but we hadn't in person, or at least online over Zoom, how we do, had talked about what we thought about Guardians of the Galaxy. Like you and me were texting back and forth like, oh my God, man, the movie's going to be so great after the theater. But we got into the whole conversation of, Guardians of the Galaxy, God, it's so amazing. God, we love it because of X, Y, and Z. And then you brought up, it was like, hey, do you think that's the reason why people didn't like Multiverse of Madness as much, or didn't like Thor Love and Thunder as much, or whatever, because of different points? And then we kind of had this really awesome discussion, and I'm like, man, we got to put this into an episode because it's such a good conversation. And what did Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 do so well that while people are calling it the mid CU, or the MCU that's mid, why? And so we were kind of going back and forth, and that's where this segment came up.
Yeah, so we're going to be discussing what Marvel can learn from the Guardians of the Galaxy 3.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And so I think it's easy for us to kind of just talk about what we love. And one of the things that I loved about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 was, the characters. This was the first thing for me, because James Gunn does such a good job of humor and like juxtaposing to another director in the MCU, Taika Waititi, who's one of my favorite directors. I have a signed poster on my wall from Thor Ragnarok. Like, I love Taika.
That's awesome.
But like Thor Love and Thunder for me didn't work. And this is why I realized, because the characters in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 were in on the joke, where I felt like Thor in Thor Love and Thunder was the joke. So my thing is, like, I don't want him to be the button. I want them to be in on it, unless, and this is the caveat, they were in that role from the beginning, like a Drax. So Drax, was known as the dumb guy, whatever. And then they flip it on its head, as you see in Volume 3, where Thor wasn't a joke in the first movie. He was arrogant, but he was still a badass. He still was one of the most powerful Avengers. He was able to take down the Hulk. And slowly as time went on for me, I felt like by Thor Love and Thunder, he kind of was just big, goofy guy. He was doing splits and kicking. And for me, that kind of dimmed, which is point two, the stakes of it all. And also it turned him into a joke rather than him creating the jokes. And
in defense of Thor and
Mm-hmm.
the humor, the first movie, I feel like the humor came from him not understanding Earth. And so like silly things like him slamming the mug and stuff down. But then as he learns Earth and becomes more Earth-like, I think the joke is that he's kind of a lighthearted frat dude. And I think that I think he was always that. Like on Asgard, he was always that. I think we see that in the first movie as well. And then when he comes to Earth, it's like, that doesn't fit well with us. That's what's funny. And now that he does fit well with us, now the joke is, I think it's a little jarring.
Yeah, you watched the What If cartoon that they released?
So good, yeah.
I felt like he just became his character from
that.
Yeah, but that was the joke, and that was the joke. Rather than him being like, I thought Thor Ragnarok, and this kind of brings me to point two, is that there needs to be stakes, like true stakes for the main character. And another thing with Thor Love and Thunder, again, well, this is kind of skipping ahead, but the villain was awesome. I love Gore, and I love Gore in the comics, because you see how Gore is going around the world and you see him slowly fall apart. I still think Christian Bale did a great job of showing what he lost. But you see in this comic series how Gore is going around and eliminating all the gods in all the different worlds. And I felt like there wasn't enough stakes for Thor in Thor Love and Thunder. I never once, for me, and I'm not saying if you felt this way, I'm super happy for you. If you like Thor Love and Thunder, I'm happy for you. Like, I really am glad. But for me personally, I never felt like he was in any real danger. Like, I never felt like he was potentially going to die. Like I
So
always,
why is that in Guardians 3? I went in thinking we're going to see somebody die. I think that leans in on it. And so the entire time, every single thing that happens, I'm like, oh, Drax is going to die here. Oh, this one's going to die here. Nebula's going to die there. Meanwhile, like in, for example, Multiverse of Madness, we literally saw a temple crush Scarlet Witch, and absolutely nobody believes that she's dead. By all accounts, she should be dead. But none of us believe that happened. You know, we're like, oh, there's a little bit of flash there. She's probably alive. She is alive. We know she's alive because she's a big enough character and stuff like that. We know she's alive. But yet in Guardians, and I think this goes to the idea that one of the big reasons I think Guardians works over any other movie in the Phase 4 and now Phase 5 is the fact that it's a James Gunn movie first and a MCU movie second. It's not interconnected to everything as much. There are definitely references to like, hey, you know, Nebula was tortured by her dad, stuff like that. But for the most part, it keeps to itself. And we went in knowing this is the end of the trilogy. So we didn't know what was going to happen, but we know there's going to be closure. And unfortunately, when we're watching Marvel movies now, there is no promise for closure. Because the idea is that there won't be. The idea is that this has to keep going on to keep making money for Marvel. But Guardians went and told you there's not going to be this team again. And are we willing to sacrifice people like Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, Thor, for there to be real stakes in these movies again?
Yes, that's a good question. And I think that you kind of touched on a few things for me. And one of them is respect to the character's history and the trauma that they've been through. And what James Gunn did really well with the characters in Guardians of the Galaxy was that, like, we were able to see the trauma. Like, we've seen Quill go through losing his mom and then like finding his dad. Turns out his dad's a dick, losing the dad, and then losing his real dad, which was Yondu. And we'd known that Rocket had lost something, but we didn't know what. And in this movie, you see what he lost. I mean, he lost his only family that he had to begin with. He lost his innocence because he was this scared little creature that was then given consciousness. We saw that he almost lost his life. And so there was this fear of like, whoa, he's lost so much. Don't let him lose his life too. So I think stakes are so important. They have to be there so that you care if the hero wins or not. And then also it brings me to something that you were alluding to, and I think it was right on the border, is that the villains should have a personal connection to the main character. And I felt like Gore didn't necessarily have a personal connection to Thor. I guess he needed the hammer, but there was no other reason he wanted to kill Thor other than, well, you're a god and you're not going to care about me. And this is kind of how I felt about Ant-Man too. Kang didn't really care who Ant-Man was. He's just like, I want you to just get me this thing so I can get out of here. If anything, Kang had more of a connection to Janet. Main character. So I want
she should be the main character.
yeah, right. I mean, so that's the thing. Like, I felt like for some of these other movies, there was no connection from the main characters to the villain.
Yeah, Namor like knew their dad, not even anybody that was alive at the time. If you go to all of them, matter of fact, one of the biggest highlights from Scarlet Witch versus Doctor Strange is that it was like Scarlet Witch was betraying him. That's the only thing that really felt cool. And so then it was like, oh, Scarlet Witch is now bad Scarlet Witch, which we know comic book wise, she flips that switch often. But this was the first time of seeing like, oh no, she's actually, because, you know, when she's under Ultron's, that was like not even really Scarlet Witch at all yet. So this was it. And I like the idea that that connection's important and also kind of feels grounded in a way too, where it's not just like Thanos snapping his finger to erase all of mankind. Like High Evolutionary is deleting planets. He is killing a lot of people. Yeah. And there's a question of like, hey, when Thanos switched his finger, how many people died from High Evolutionary's people? Whatever. Good point. But he is killing a lot more, but for somehow it still felt very grounded and small in a way. Way, you know.
Yeah, because they just
destroyed the planet.
Yeah, you're totally right. I think the High Evolutionary, we see from the start of the movie what he did to Rocket. And then we're brought into how Rocket is kind of handling present day. And then Rocket gets attacked. Rocket's almost dying. And then you see the rest of the Guardians around him. At this point, they are all family. I mean, they say it at the end of Volume 2. So they can't let their brother die. And right there, it's so personal to the rest of the Guardians. Like the whole adventure is around trying to save Rocket, and then Rocket's alive. And now he's like, I got to take down this guy who made my life miserable. Like, yes, he gave me consciousness, but he is the reason why I'm doing all of these things. Like why I am the way I am, why I think the way I think. And I've never had a chance to pay him back. And so
just real quick, let's make sure we avoid spoilers. I want to throw that out there too. Let's try to avoid spoilers. We haven't said any yet.
Yeah, we haven't. Okay, I'll try my best.
We're good.
But the stakes are personal there. You're right. I think other than Wanda, which again, Wanda is not even directly trying to go against Doctor Strange. Wanda is just trying to go to a different galaxy or a different universe to get her kids. Doctor Strange just happens to be in the way.
Matter of fact, the thing that didn't work in that movie, as much as I like the character from the comic books, is America Chavez. And it was just because she was like thrown in. She didn't have, I need to borrow your abilities is the only thing. It's like, you know how many other things can jump dimensions that you've already touched and influenced?
Yeah.
Like, why would you go to that? Like, go to Asgard. There's all kinds of toys in that basement that can do it. And it's like, why are we going to that again? Like, I don't know, man.
Which is a perfect point that leads me into point 4. And the last point. The main character's actions should stop the villain. So I'll give you an example. In Ant-Man the Wasp: Quantumania, who stops Kang? Like you could technically say, well, they threw him into that bubble thing, whatever. But what weakened him and ultimately brought his power down was the ants that Michael Douglas's character brought in, which was Scott Lang. Or wait, no, not Scott Lang. Why can't I think of it?
It was Hank Pym.
Hank Pym. Sorry, Hank Pym.
Yeah.
So it was technically Hank Pym that kind of helped save him, plus MODOK. What Ant-Man did at the end was just kind of give the final push. He didn't really stop him. We don't even know if he's defeated. We don't know if they killed him. All I know is that they were able to stop him for that moment and then went back to the real world. And they don't know if they fixed anything. I think the whole ending of it was trying to give you this feeling of they didn't actually fix anything. Thor: Love and Thunder, same thing. Like Eternity is kind of the one that, makes Gore realize, like, hey, I'm over, but at least I can bring my daughter back. It's not really Thor that stops Gore. It's not really Ant-Man that stops Kang. It's not really Doctor Strange that stops Wanda. It's all these other characters that are coming in that happen to be there. And I know you could say the main character is the one influencing it, but in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, it is the Guardians. It's Rocket. It's Peter. Yes. It's Drax that stop the High Evolutionary.
And the stakes is not with the defeating the boss. We're not going to go into spoilers of it. It's about saving people and everybody. So like that's heroism. And so it's like, it's heroism. So it's nice to see that it's like, hey, our priority isn't to stop this guy. It's to save these people. And I liked that. Like that was a huge part of their story, was saving as many as people. And it was to a detriment of themselves, but they nailed it.
Right. Like who was Thor saving? I mean, other than
the kids of gods. Asgard. He was saving the kids of Asgard, but it kind of, I don't know, man. It just doesn't feel cool. Like, it didn't feel worth it to me. It kind of felt cheap in, like he could have gave. So you're saying he could have gave, and again, I'm not trying to shit on Thor: Love and Thunder. There was a lot I liked about it. And if you like it, I'm super happy for you. Like just for me, I didn't want to see Gore the kidnapper. I wanted to see Gore the god butcher. So Thor should have been saving other gods, and then making how it's supposed to be. Yeah. And I honestly think if we had seen gods who are on the opposite side, who are actually helping people outside of Thor, we would have cared more about him saving them. One, we didn't see enough gods get butchered. And two, we didn't see any gods help people. All we saw was, Russell Crowe being kind of this pompous dick in Olympus, and they were like, think about it, which is one of the points I want to add to this. I think Marvel needs to stop forcing the connection so much. Let's be honest, Russell Crowe's entire purpose of being in this movie is to launch Hercules' story. Right. And it's like, that's a damn shame that you're going to basically take the center of this movie to set up the sequel or to set up a future movie. And so many of them do this. The end of Wakanda Forever is to set up the next Black Panther. The end of, every one of these so far has been to set up the next one. Even what I would say probably the second best, that might be tough to say, of phase 4, phase 5, which is a Spider-Man movie. Yeah. That's setting up the next 3 Spider-Man movies. It's like, okay, now Peter Parker's reset. He's poor now. we get it. You're resetting things. But everything's about continuing the story. Guardians of the Galaxy, like you could continue that story, but you don't have to. You know, we know how that ends.
Yeah.
You don't have to continue that if you didn't need to.
Yeah, where they do get the continuation, and I don't know if it's a spoiler, just say for the end credits, but the chapter of the Guardians is concluded, and that's what we wanted to see. What you want to see in a trilogy is like you want to see something conclude. You want some resolution for the characters.
Closure. There has not been closure in the Marvel world since Tony Stark died. That's the last time we had closure in the Marvel universe, I think.
Yeah. You're right.
Chadwick Boseman's death too, but that was kind of a situational thing. But I'm saying storytelling wise, the last choice they made to actually give a conclusion is Tony Stark. And in this one, we had successful conclusions to stories, and they weren't necessarily like everybody died. They were just like, I'm cool with where you're at right now, and you can live your life, and I don't have to follow you through that part.
Yeah, exactly.
That's such a unique thing in the Marvel world.
It is. So even though, maybe a character doesn't die or does die or whatever, there's still some finality to it. And there still feels like the arc of this character, what we've followed them through 3 to 5 movies is finished. And that's the thing. You want to feel some completion to it. For a new Ant-Man movie, I don't know if I felt the completion. It totally, for me, just felt like an episode 1 to a series, rather than the finale of a series, which I thought was really interesting. And then, Thor: Love and Thunder. I understand that you want to evolve the character, but now when you watch Thor 1, if you just watch just the Thor movies, which I know you can't really do, but if you did, Thor 1 would look like a completely different person than Thor 4. And yes, you want some arc, but you don't want them to, you still want to respect the heritage and the history of that character, their base. Like, I felt like I lost so much of that in Thor: Love and Thunder, just simply to make me laugh. And it's like, I want to laugh. I love laughing. I love comedy, but I don't want to just laugh. Like, I wanted to feel something and feel some closure there. It was. I
want to touch on real quick, because I know we keep using the same 3 examples, but also Black Widow had some issues where it felt like it was just trying to introduce more characters to be used later on. Shang-Chi, I think, is for some reason not talked about enough, but that actually was a very good movie.
Yeah.
I'd say probably the third best of Phase 4.
Yeah, but so on Shang-Chi, I think it's because again, and I'm not saying these are the 4 final points, but because the personal connection between Shang-Chi and his dad. Think about it, the villain of the movie is his dad.
And it doesn't touch the rest of the MCU until it needs to, until the very end.
True, but it has stakes for the ultimate world. They couldn't let out the big bad. They're not overly superpowered to where they're not infallible. There's several times where it feels like Shang-Chi is narrowly away from death. The connection to his father, and he's the one that ultimately stops the villain. It's between him and his dad. So I think through those things right there, it feels like it's more satisfying. For me, anyway, when I look at him, you're like, this is how a Marvel movie should feel. When you watch the first Iron Man movie, it's Tony Stark who beats the final bad guy and stops him because he has more knowledge. He knows how to use the powers better. Like, it's him. There's nobody else coming in there. And yes, the world kind of gets expanded there, but the same thing for the first Thor movie, the same thing for the first Captain America movie. There's this finality, there's this connection there, and they're the one responsible for the conclusion.
One more thing too is Eternals was one of their. I think Eternals' biggest problem is it tried to be too big, and it was forcing itself to be connected in a way that kind of ruined itself. Like, okay, so you told me there's this giant celestial just kind of in the water somewhere. It doesn't make any sense to be that way. So that was also a problem.
You know what's interesting about Eternals for me is I really liked Chloe Zhao's Nomads. I forgot what the movie was that she won the Oscar for. So I went into it before I watched Eternals. I watched that, and then I went into Eternals and I watched it, and I was like, "What the f did I just watch? I don't get it." And now it's on Disney Plus, and I've seen Eternals probably 3 times. And the more I watch it, the more I like it. But the problem now, when we got Eternals to now, is you want these characters to now pop up in other places. You want it to allude to somewhere more than a little footnote in a She-Hulk episode. So like I want some more connectivity between them. And also it was so convoluted as to like, who's the big bad? Who are we trying to fight here? what's the problem? Like, is it the deviants? Because they wipe out the deviants at the end. Like, it's just Angelina Jolie versus Crow, and she takes him out. And then it's like, oh, wait, this other character. I think we could talk spoilers for Eternals, right?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's like, okay, boom, Icarus is bad. Like, what? Okay. I don't mind the twist of it all, but it just didn't land super well for me. And it just felt really confused as to what it was.
Okay. So to give some structure to this conversation, by the way, guys, again, this is just a test run. We're trying something new with discussion. One of the things I think we should do is, I think you did a good job of like making these points. And I think I should have just let you do your points instead of me overriding and adding stuff here and there, you know?
It's all good.
So things we're learning as we play around with this idea. But let's add some structure in the fact that, like, okay, now going forward, what are the things that Marvel needs to make sure they do? I'll throw out the fact that I think that the stories need to be not as connected like they were in the Phase 1 era, but like going into X-Men and into Fantastic Four, I would be fully on board with those, not touching anything else in the Marvel for a while. I think that's completely fine with me.
I think that's a great point. I'm okay with them alluding to other things, but the adventure and everything needs to be started by a personal connection to the villain. It needs to have stakes where it feels like the main character could either, maybe they don't have to die, but maybe someone around them needs to die, or somebody that they care about needs to happen so that they can save other people. And the last thing is that they need to be personally responsible for stopping the villain.
Okay. I like that. X-Men to me, like the personal stakes between the two characters, it's already built in, right? Professor X and Magneto, to me, have the coolest rivalry in all of Marvel.
Absolutely.
And so that would be great. And then we could have the same kind of thing set up with Reed Richards and Doctor Doom. Make it to where there's something personal there. There's oftentimes something personal there. But, go through the thing where he hired them to go into space and they got knocked by something, and then boom, there you go.
Right. Because I think that's the fun thing about both those examples that you just gave was Charles Xavier could have easily went to Magneto's side, but he chooses to oppose him, right? Same thing with Reed Richards. I mean, he's so genius. He sees the flaws in humanity, but he can be overly confident too. He could have easily became Doctor Doom, but they don't, because they choose to be on the right side of good, of saving people, of free will, and they don't, so they oppose each other. I think it's built in there. It's letting the characters kind of just, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like the right way to say it, just to like really build and letting the tension just kind of evolve because of them being on opposing sides, if that makes sense.
And then you go with characters first. So like Guardians of the Galaxy in the first movie would make very different choices in the Guardians of the Galaxy in the third movie.
Yeah.
Easily. And so you just let the characters build and become full characters, and then they go off there. So I think both those movies, the new ones coming up, are really good ways of kind of like I would like to see X-Men explore, why would you want to side with humans when like on paper, Brotherhood's right in a lot of ways. It's just how you go about it. And then we know with the Fantastic Four, we're talking about them using Star Trek as their template. They've already said they're going to use Star Trek as their template for it. And the idea is that they want to make sure it's all about like hope and stuff like that, which Star Trek and future hope. And so like, okay, show us where instead of a future where there's going to be an apocalypse or something like that, like, no, we're going to shoot for the stars. We're going to put our money into science and discovery. God, I'm so ready to freaking root for a movie about that. So
yeah,
I think that's what we can get. And then maybe Dr. Doom's trying to like, oh, but I want to mine a asteroid. I don't know. We could have fun with it, but there's something there.
There's so much there. I mean, there's, decades and decades of history of making these characters compelling and making their rivalry with their villains compelling. It seems like it should be a no-brainer, but I think one thing that you said, which I super agree with, is that, let's stop trying to make it just connect for the sake of connecting, and let's build a story that's focused on the characters first and foremost. And then they need something that needs to be driving them, and so does the villain. And for some reason, the only thing that's stopping them is each other. And I love that. I love that just kind of naturally built in tension. It's
something that outside of this last Spider-Man, but all Spider-Mans nail. Like every Spider-Man feels like it's just him versus Rhino on the streets of New York. And if he fails, There's no one to save him. Matter of
Right.
fact, I just talked to the biographer not long ago for the Spider-Man biography, and he was bringing that up. The fact that it's like there's usually not anybody else to save New York except for Spider-Man, and that's
Yeah.
why it's cool because it's this kid from high school or college who's just like fighting LexCorp.
Yeah.
That's just it. And it's
Yeah.
so simple and so perfect.
Yeah.
It
and
doesn't
again,
need to go to
I think
Kansas and save something over there. It's all
Yeah.
about Manhattan. Yeah.
that's true. But yes, I totally agree with you. And I also think with the example of Spider-Man is there's stakes. Like sometimes I feel
Yes.
like Spider-Man may not win. Like I feel like he could die, he could get trapped. Even in Spider-Man: Homecoming, which just came out on Disney Plus, so enjoy everybody in the U.S. Which I went back and watched. It's so amazing. In that movie alone, in this first new Spider-Man, whether it's the Tobey Maguire one or the Tom Holland one, actually, you feel like he might not win. You're like,
Yeah.
wait, the Vulture just dropped a building on him, or the Goblin is about to like spike him with his glider. Like you almost for a second think that he could lose. And again, I didn't think Doctor Strange could lose or would lose his life. I didn't think Thor would lose his life. I'm trying to think of something else. Maybe Shuri, there was a moment. So that was close.
But I
closer
didn't think
for me.
Wakanda itself was going to fall. I thought Wakanda
Right.
itself was going to be fine. Which
Yeah.
that movie, I think, is much more about Wakanda than it is. But I think, I was like, okay, if this all goes bad, the Wakandan people will always rise again. Like, that's their thing. And
Yeah.
so I thought Namor is not going to be able to be successful, especially when they showed Namor's people and I'm like, they seem beatable. Not to be
Right.
mean, but they did.
Yeah.
You know,
So yeah, just make us feel stakes, and I don't think that takes away from the comedy. The comedy will be there. Like if you're a good writer, those comedic moments will naturally come out of drama, and it's like give us something to hold on to first, where we can root for something, and then break the tension with the comedy. And James Gunn nailed that in Volume 3.
And give us those heartfelt moments, man. The heartfelt moments in Guardians of the Galaxy, I was tearing up a few times in that theaters. I'm going to be honest with you guys. There
Yeah,
was a few lines that just got me so. Drax line, oh my god, got me so good. And I
yeah,
was like, son of a bitch.
I know.
I forgot all
man.
about that part of him, and it's a big part of him.
That's the thing. Each one of them had these touching moments. Like Mantis has a line that she says defending Drax, Drax with the kids, Nebula telling Drax, hey, I don't know if that's a spoiler.
That's the line, yeah.
Nebula has a line, and they all do. Seeing Peter Quill scream over Rocket, it was just like, oh my God, he cares so much for this.
Felt good.
Yeah. I loved it. Endgame, Infinity War. I know these are movies that not every Marvel movie can be at those top tier. I get that. But the stakes were so heavy and deep in there. I'm like, God, just give us a taste of that. Make me feel like there's something to lose, or these characters have something to lose. And man, I'll ride with you through everything. I'm like, I'm on board. Yeah.
All right, guys. What I want you to do is let us know on social media, Twitter, Instagram, everything, all links in the bio, what you think Marvel should learn from Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Second thing I want to know is what do you guys think about us adding these discussions every so often to the end of these? We're going to be doing more of the top fives. We know you guys are big fans of top fives. And just like with top fives, when we make a standalone video for those, we're going to do a standalone video for the discussions as well. These are really good for times when there's not a lot of news, and we're heading into summertime when most of the news is like, hey, there's a new movie that came out. Not a lot of production happens right now. So we appreciate you guys' feedback on this podcast. That's how we make it better and we continue to grow.